Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel and get notifications whenever a video goes up. Let's talk about Lomachenko. The video's a little bit late coming. I didn't bring you a preview video, so it'll be easy for me to say, I knew this could happen, or I knew that that Lopez was a real threat. The truth is, I thought Lomachenko was going to look sensational because I didn't think that Lopez was as light on his feet as he was. I didn't think he would be rotating quickly enough to be able to deal with the lateral movement of Lomachenko. And I thought Loma would look very, very good. I thought early it would be a cagey affair, and then I thought Loma would come on strong late on. But let's discuss what actually happened. Let's discuss a limitation that Lomachenko has, which is shared by Alexander Usyk, by the way. And it's something that could haunt Usyk. I've spoken about this in the past. It could come back to haunt Usyk in the heavyweight division. And there's a reason that I think that against some elite level fighters, not all, but against some, Michael Hunter is actually the bigger threat than Usyk, even though I think Usyk is better than Hunter. Hunter is the bigger threat. Styles make fights. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about this limitation. We'll talk about the scorecards. We'll talk about where Lomachenko went wrong and where he would need to adjust if he was to have a chance in a rematch, if there was to be a rematch, and the possible outcomes of a rematch. Firstly, we'll start with the scorecard. They're all over the place, the scorecards for this. I mean, the actual official scorecards I thought were, especially one of them, I thought was really poor. I thought it was a close fight. I had Lopez winning the fight 7-5, but it was a comfortable 7-5 because he built up such a lead. So Lomachenko was always chasing, and it got to the point where you think Lomachenko is going to have to do something pretty significant in the latter part of the fight in order to turn this around. So think of it like if it's a football match, 3-2, say, sounds like a close scorecard, a close result. But if one football team's 3-0 up after 30 minutes and then the other team scores 2 in the last 10 minutes, it doesn't quite reflect the typical 3-2 match, right? And that's almost how I see this fight. Now, Andre Ward's scorecard, he had it as a draw. And my brother, who I didn't see it with, actually messaged me and said, you're going to think I'm mad, but I've got this fight as a draw. So he hadn't seen Andre Ward's scorecard yet. So I could really, there's only one swing round from what I had. But like I said, for me, you've got to be really looking to give it to Lomachenko to come up with that. I've seen other people that have got 8-4 to Lopez, and I'm a lot more. I'm closer to that than I am to the draw. I definitely don't see a way in which Lomachenko won this fight. For me, the right man got the job done. Let's talk about how and why and how and what happened. So Lomachenko post-fight in one of his interviews said that he said, real boxing fans know that I was collecting data early on, and that's why I was inactive. Look, it's all well and good collecting the data, and I get that. You give them different looks, you make adjustments, you're trying to pick up on certain patterns and so on and so forth. I understand that. However, you have to be active during that period. You can give up a couple of rounds. After 4 rounds, if you're 3-1 down, after 3 rounds even, if you're 3-0 down, there's ways to make up for it. However, if after 5 rounds you're 5-0 down, and listen, I'll tell you what my scorecard was. I had definitely the first 5 went to Lopez. The 6th and the 7th I thought were close, swing rounds. We'll get to those in a second. 8, 9, 10, 11 I gave to Lomachenko. The 12th was also a competitive round, but it was Lopez that you saw Lomachenko he came in looking for something big. He fought at a high tempo. He was staying in the pocket a lot longer than he should have really, but he was looking essentially for a knockout or a knockdown. He knew he was behind. I gave that round to Lopez because I felt he affected Loma more. The 6th I also gave to Lopez. The 7th I gave to Lomachenko, but they were close rounds. In other words, after 6 rounds I had Lopez 6-0 up or 5-1 at best. All of a sudden, you've got to win every single round to turn this fight around to either get a draw or a narrow win. So when you're collecting data, you're not collecting data for 5 or 6 rounds. By that point, you should have figured out what you're doing with your opponent. So what stopped Lomachenko from being able to do what he wants to do? Well, it is a limitation, if you ask me. But a lot of sort of counter-punchers do this. Usyk does this. And this is the potential limitation in the heavyweight division, where they do take the time to read fighters. Didn't Lomachenko start slowly against Pedraza? Didn't Lomachenko start slowly against Luke Campbell? He came on strong against Campbell. Didn't Alexander Usyk, wasn't he 3 rounds down, 3-0 down against Michael Hunter? Wasn't he 3-3 after 6 rounds against Maris Briedis? Wasn't he behind early against Tony Bellew? So what they do is they tend to look at you, show you different looks, adjustments, trying to read your pattern, and then they go to work. And with all that foot pressure they're applying, they're still getting you tired, so to speak, as the fight is emerging early on. And Lomachenko's father, by the way, I'm comparing the two because they're not just best friends and best men at each other's weddings and stuff. Lomachenko's father also trains Usyk, so there is a similarity in the schooling they've received. There's a similarity in their style of fighting, and they both tend to do this. Now, with Usyk, that could come back to haunt him because you can't get away with just being inactive and trying to read a pattern against a guy like Deontay Wilder for too long, or Anthony Joshua. They'll clean your clock if you start slowly. So this is a potential banana skin for them, and why I believe Michael Hunter might be better equipped to overthrow those two. I think Usyk would have a better chance against Fury than Hunter would, although I think they're both a threat to Fury. I think the cruiserweight's got a lot of talent going into the heavyweight division, which is why I don't agree with this new weight category they're trying to do either, but we'll leave that for another video. But the point is, it is a part of their game to start slow. Fine, but not that slow. When you're a shorter guy, there are two sort of traditional, I guess you could say, methods of approaching a fight against a taller man. One of them is to tuck your chin, looking to move either laterally or bob your head up and down. You're basically looking to avoid that first shot, that first attack, to get inside and let go of short power shots. Think Joe Frazier, think Mike Tyson, think Jack Dempsey, think Alexander Povetkin. Lomachenko doesn't have that in his arsenal. He's not that sort of fighter. He doesn't have the equipment, so to speak, I don't believe, to have that approach. The second approach is to fight a raiding style, where you're on the outside, you cannot be reached, and you're using your superior feet and footwork and your ability to read a guy's patterns to be able to jump in and land shots and get back out. Think David Haye against Nikolai Valuev, okay? That sort of approach. That's the approach Lomachenko had to take. What he didn't account for, and what I didn't account for, was that Lopez was very, very good with his timing of body shots, spear-like shots, could have been to the chest, to the solar plexus, just to keep Loma honest when he's trying to jump in, and he was throwing a lot of leather behind them. There was meat behind those shots. So he's telling Lomachenko, you're going to have to come through hellfire, and I'm not going to react too much to your feints. When you do jump in, I am going to be willing to take a little step back to maintain that range, to give you that extra step to then take forward, and I will rip a shot in towards your body to do that, to keep you honest. Now, a lot of the shots were coming off the gloves and off the arms. So Lomachenko was doing a good job of not really absorbing much punishment early on. But he clearly felt that level of punching power and didn't want to throw caution to the wind because he was so inactive. So it wasn't a case of him just reading and taking notes because, yeah, okay, do that. But at the same time, let go of your hands. Give the judges something to think about. Instead, what he did, if you're talking about a percentage factor of risk, he was taking a 5% risk, say, for the first 5 rounds, right? Then he had to start upping that dramatically. And in the 12th, he threw caution to the wind and was taking 90% level of risk because he was needing a knockout. And that's when Lopez started to land some significant shots and they were clearly affecting him. What he really should have done, and what he would have to do in the rematch, in my opinion, is, yes, allow a slower start to the fight. But you have to take some risk. Rather than 5%, take 20% risk. Land some shots. Give the judges something to think about. If after 6 rounds you're 4-2 down or you're 3-3, even, who knows, you've got something to work on to come back into the fight. But if you're 5-1 down or 6-0 down, all of a sudden you're in serious, serious trouble. And that was the problem he had. And then all of a sudden he's got to throw caution to the wind as the smaller guy who doesn't have the sort of skill set we spoke about that would enable that Mike Tyson-esque approach. And he's not really a one-punch knockout artist to be able to jump in, land a big shot and get out. He needs to outbox a guy. He needs to find that rhythm. And so that didn't work well for him, and he'd have to adjust in that. Could he do it? Yes, I believe that in a rematch he could do it, and I believe he'd win a rematch. If there was a rematch, they should push for it, in my opinion, depending on how the surgery's gone. He's had shoulder surgery. He won't be back in training until January. He'd probably want a warm-up fight before that. Thing is, Lopez is not going to hang around forever. He's going to move on. So there has to be a certain level of risk, and after the surgery, he's going to have to jump straight back in if he wants Lopez, in my opinion. I think at this stage of his career, at the age that he's at, he needs to push for the immediate rematch. Now, there's a flip side to that coin. Chocolatito, after his first loss to Ring Vasai, a fight that I thought he actually won, he then decided, right, I've got to really let my hands go in this second fight. I'm going to stand my ground. Let's go to war. He got knocked out. Don't be surprised if Lomachenko approaches the fight like he did in the 12th. From early, he could get knocked out. I don't think he has to do that. He's had that ability now to look at Lopez. Yes, he might make a couple of adjustments, Lopez, so you might spend 1 or 2 rounds looking at him, but by now you should know your patterns. You would be hoping that you'd pick up from where you left off in the first fight without having to be so desperate and take such a high-risk approach in the 12th at the beginning of the next fight. You won't have to do that, hopefully. Having said that, again, the flip side to the coin, Lopez was fresher early in the fight. Is his timing still going to be on point? Will Lomachenko be even able to take rather than a 5% risk, a 15 or 20% risk? Well, I guess it's a fight game. He's going to have to. I believe he would do it in a rematch, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got knocked out. Let me know what you think about that, guys. Let me know what you think about Usyk as well, and the observation that there's a similarity there and how it could affect him in the heavyweight division. But I'll also say this, right? I've heard some terrible things online the way some people analyze these things, man. You hear it from pro fighters and pundits too, and you just sit there and you think to yourself, what are you guys talking about? Devin Haney, I get it. He's trying to build himself up as some sort of bad guy, I think he's doing it on purpose. But, he came out and he said, I told you all Lomachenko was whack. But then you've got so many people that are sitting there, fans. Forget fighters. They're going to talk trash. You've got fans that are sitting there saying Lomachenko was exposed. And I'm just sitting there thinking, what are people talking about, man? It's like people have this pre-existing notion and they're looking to sort of feed that. They're looking to feed that idea and they're looking to pump their own propaganda into the story so that they can engage in their cognitive dissonance. This guy, exposed. What does exposed mean? It means you were a hype job and all of a sudden your limitations have been exposed to the world. It's so dumb. The eyeball test alone, as Teddy Atlas calls it, will tell you he's one of the best fighters I've ever seen. Okay? No man is invincible. I've told you this before. I told you before Golovkin started to decline, I told you that I'd spotted signs of decline. And I gave you guys a video to go and watch from his amateur days and from the early pro days and to compare his foot speed in those compared to the more recent parts of his career before the Canelo fight. So before people had really started to say, oh, Golovkin's starting to decline, I was telling you guys, his feet are slowing. Now, people had him on a pedestal. He's their hero. They don't want to admit that. They've got this idea that people are superhuman. They're not. They're human beings. No one's invincible. But it's not just the anti-Lomachenko crowd, because a lot of the times, I think it's because they were vying for pound supremacy. A lot of the times it's the pro-Crawford fans that were doing that. But now it's the anti-Crawford fans that do the same thing when we're talking about Crawford. So I came out and I said, for me, T-Bud is now definitely established as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world at this current moment in time. Now, you can make a case for Inoue. I don't think you can make a case for Canelo because it was such controversial circumstances that he won these 2 fights against Golovkin. It's hard to say he's the pound-for-pound number 1 in my opinion. Usyk still needs to do a little bit more in the heavyweight division for me to put him there. So for me, it's Crawford. And someone said to me, what are you talking about? Crawford's CV. And I'm like, what about it? Well, who's he fought? And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my God, man. So in other words, if Crawford goes and fights Errol Spence and Errol Spence beats him, what? So all of a sudden Crawford's exposed and he was a fraud. What are these people talking about? These are elite level fighters. No one's invincible. And people get this level of cognitive dissonance in all aspects of life. I'm going to digress a little bit and talk about life as a whole now in society, what we're going through at the moment globally. I'm not going to go into the details. You know what I'm talking about. You know what we're all going through globally. I don't want to get this channel shut down. But let me give you a little example, okay? There might be something you want to show against the mainstream narrative. So instead of just listening to the news, you might present somebody with a medical journal, peer-reviewed study, backed by another peer-reviewed study, backed by a third peer-reviewed study. And they're not just backed by these studies, they're also supported by established leading scientists around the world. Scientists who are going against the public narrative but are preeminent scientists in their field. And you present these medical journals and you say, look at the evidence here. It doesn't back what the prevailing narrative is saying. And if you look into those that are pushing the prevailing narrative, there might be a conflict of interest. And you might explain to them, this is why there might be a conflict of interest. Look at these ties. Look at, this investment, this financial ties, so on and so forth. And because people are so locked into their idea of what they believe to be true, rather than look at the content that you're presenting to them, they say, but you're not a doctor. I don't need to be a doctor. I understand a medical journal. I happen to have a master's degree, a master's of science degree, where I've looked into statistics around public health policy, which included me looking at medical journals. I know how to read a medical journal. But even if I didn't, it's irrelevant. I'm posing to you a set of arguments. If you're a football fan and you have an opinion on football, if you've never played professional football, does that mean that you cannot have an opinion on which team's playing well at the moment? I'm showing you a set of evidence, a set of medical journals, and I want you to look at them and consider them. And you instantly dismiss me by saying, oh, but you're not a doctor. This is cognitive dissonance. You don't want to engage with the content because you just want to continue to prevail with your existing notion of what is reality. So you say, okay then, and then you say, let me show you. I'll show you some preeminent scientists who are arguing this same thing. Forget me. Look at their arguments. And there's one very interesting guy, for instance, who I love to check out. You should check him out too. You can find him on Twitter at Fat Emperor. He's a biochemistry engineer who specializes in the root causes of diseases. His name is Ivor Cummins. You can find this guy who has a YouTube channel, and he poses various statistics-based presentations that argue against the prevailing narrative. And when you present this person with this YouTube video or his Twitter handle, they would these same people will immediately dismiss it and say, no, what are you talking about? That's Twitter. As if I'm going to take Twitter seriously. As if I'm going to take some guy on YouTube seriously. But look at who's saying it, okay? Look at who's saying it. You can't just dismiss him because it happens to be that it's on that platform. Okay, you've got different platforms, and those whether it's the mainstream press, whether it's a magazine, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, whether it's Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, it's irrelevant. Anybody can use a platform in the global public sphere. Go and check out Professor Sukarit Bhakti. Go and check out Michael Levitt, who was a Nobel laureate. Go and check out Professor John Ioannidis. Check out Michael Yeadon. I think you pronounce his name. He was Michael Yeadon. He was head of Pfizer Global. Okay, these are established world-class epidemiologists and scientists and so on and so forth. If they choose to put their stuff on a platform like Twitter, doesn't mean that their content is undermined, because that's where they're choosing to put their platform. That's where they're choosing to put their information. Well, to ignore it and dismiss it instantly engages in cognitive dissonance. And this is what we see in boxing. You have certain fans of certain fighters who do not want to consider the possibility of another guy just having a bad day, or another guy fighting a guy who's stylistically wrong for him, or too big for him, or too strong for him, or whatever. All of a sudden, no. He's just exposed. It's ludicrous. Break out of this mental slavery, my friends. Break out of it. Try and understand what's going on in life. And I digress from boxing, because this cognitive dissonance is an illness. Everything else is a symptom of that. You're dismissing nature is a problem. It's an illness. It's a symptom, I think, of wider society, whereby people have had their minds numbed and everything has to be partisan, and try and have an open mind. Anyway, let me know what you think about all the boxing stuff we spoke about. Chat to you soon. God bless.